They tried to cancel two men. Instead, they handed them the biggest audiences of their careers. On July 14, 2025, Stephen Colbert walked out onto the stage of the Ed Sullivan Theater, the same stage where the Beatles once performed for a nation that had never seen anything like them, and said something that no host on a corporate American network had said out loud, in those exact words, on live television, in front of millions of people, about the sitting president of the United States. He called it a big fat bribe. Not allegedly, not reportedly, not sources say. He named it, defined it, and delivered it with the flat certainty of a man reading out a grocery list. Paramount Global, the parent company of CBS, had just paid Donald Trump $16 million. This was the settlement of a lawsuit Trump had filed over a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris, alleging deceptive editing. Legal analysts across the political spectrum had said the lawsuit had virtually no merit. Paramount's own lawyers had said the same, and then Paramount paid $16 million, directing the funds to Trump's future presidential library. At the precise moment the company needed Trump's FCC to approve a multi-billion-dollar merger with Skydance Media, the corporation paid. The FCC approved the merger. 3 days later, CBS announced The Late Show would be canceled in May 2026. Colbert stood on stage and named the sequence. Trump took to Truth Social immediately. He said he absolutely loved that Colbert got fired. He said Colbert's talent was even less than his ratings. He said he heard Jimmy Kimmel was next. Colbert's response arrived the following night. "How dare you, sir?" He paused, letting the audience settle. Would an untalented man be able to compose the following satirical witticism? Another pause. "Go fuck yourself." The Ed Sullivan Theater came apart. Colbert stood in the middle of it, calm, and waited for the room to come back to him. Then he said, "They made one mistake. They left me alive. Now, for the next 10 months, the gloves are off." That was 9 months ago. The gloves have been off every single night since. To understand why this fight matters beyond late-night television, you have to understand the architecture of what happened at Paramount, because Colbert didn't name it a bribe for rhetorical effect. He named it because the structure of what occurred is traceable and documented and has now been examined by the Writers Guild of America, 3 Democratic senators, CNN, and the London School of Economics. Here is the sequence again, slowly. Paramount needed FCC approval for the Skydance merger. The FCC was run by Brendan Carr, a man Trump had described at a public event as perhaps the most powerful man in the room, and who had already used his position to threaten ABC's broadcast license over Jimmy Kimmel's suspension. At the same moment the merger was pending, Trump's lawsuit over the Harris interview was moving through the courts. Paramount paid $16 million. The FCC approved the merger. The Late Show, the top-rated program in late-night television, was canceled. CBS said it was purely a financial decision while making no other visible cost-cutting moves at the show. The Writers Guild of America wrote formally to the New York State Attorney General saying they had significant concerns that the cancellation was a bribe, sacrificing free speech to curry favor with the administration. Senators Warren, Sanders, and Wyden wrote to Skydance CEO David Ellison asking whether there was a secret side deal. Warren wrote in Variety, "Was it a coincidence that CBS canceled Colbert 3 days after he spoke out?" Colbert, asked about it in a GQ cover story, did not accuse Paramount directly. He described what happened. He said it was self-evidently damaging to the reputation of the network, the corporation, and the news division, and that it was unclear to him why anyone would do that other than to curry favor with a single individual. "You put those together yourself," he said. On September 14, 2025, the 77th Emmy Awards were held. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert won Outstanding Talk Series, its first Emmy ever, after nearly a decade on air, after being canceled. 2 days later, Colbert walked back onto his stage holding the trophy and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome one and all. Welcome to the Emmy Award-winning Late Show." The audience gave him a standing ovation. They chanted his name. He waited them out, then looked directly into the cameras. "Speaking of Emmys," he said, "Donald Trump doesn't have one." The line is sharper than it sounds. Trump has hosted television for 15 years. He launched The Apprentice partly because NBC gave him the credibility the entertainment industry had always withheld from him. He still brings up ratings. He still compares himself to hosts. He tracked his coverage in the trades. He called Colbert's cancellation a personal victory. And then the canceled show won the Emmy. The show he said was failing. The host, he said, had no talent, received the highest award in television while still canceled. While Trump, who has appeared on more hours of American television than almost any living person, has never won one. Trump responded by calling Colbert a pathetic train wreck. He told CBS to cancel the show earlier than May. He then attacked Kimmel in a Truth Social post, calling him the worst of all. and confused Kimmel with Colbert, claiming Kimmel had been horrible at the Kennedy Center honors, when in fact it was Colbert who had hosted the ceremony 3 years running before Trump took over. Colbert called him Grandpa Puddin' Skull on air. He read Trump's own words back to him and noted they had confused the two hosts, then said quietly to his audience, "He doesn't even know who he's trying to cancel." The Iran war gave Colbert his sharpest material of the final season. On March 31, 2026, he played a clip of Trump speaking at an investors forum in Miami, describing what he said was classified military footage of the strikes. The clip ran, "Missiles launched, missiles launched, missiles launching, they're launching. Okay, we're ready." Colbert let it finish. Then he said, "It reminds me of Winston Churchill." The audience erupted because Trump has an extensively documented reverence for Churchill. He reinstalled the bronze Churchill bust in the Oval Office within hours of taking office. He has repeatedly drawn the comparison himself. So Colbert quoted Churchill's most famous line, "We shall fight them on the beaches," and translated it into the vernacular of the man who had just said missiles launched. "It's very cool. We shall fight them on the beaches," Colbert said slowly, "like pew pew pew, ka-chow, blammo. So cool." He then quoted the New York Times, which had described the Iran war's management as having an erratic and make-it-up-as-it-goes feel, and delivered the diagnosis. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is officially America's first improv war, a war launched without congressional authorization, a war whose objectives have changed 6 times, a war whose duration the defense secretary described as lasting any particular number of weeks, a war whose deadlines have been extended twice because Iran denied making the requests Trump claimed they had made, a war being conducted from Truth Social at 11 o'clock at night. Improv war." The label stuck because it was accurate, and because accuracy delivered at the right rhythm and in the right tone is the most durable form of comedy. While Colbert was doing all of this on The Late Show, Jimmy Kimmel was doing something similar, but with the Oscars podium. On March 16, 2026, Kimmel stood at the Academy Awards to present the Documentary Feature Award. He talked about courage, the courage it takes to make films about things that could get you killed, in countries whose leaders prefer you didn't. And then he paused. "As you know," he said, "there are some countries whose leaders don't support free speech." He looked out at the room. "I'm not at liberty to say which. A beat. Let's just leave it at North Korea and CBS." The audience laughed and groaned at exactly the same moment, because the reference was instant and complete. North Korea, the authoritarian state that controls all media. CBS, the network that paid $16 million to the president and then canceled the show of the host who called it a bribe. No further explanation required. The joke named them together, in the same breath, as rhetorical equals, and let the audience finish the thought themselves. Stephen Chung, Trump's White House communications director, responded on X. He called Kimmel a classless hack who lives a pathetic existence where nobody, not even his family, enjoys his miserable company. He brought up blackface comedy sketches from 20 years earlier that Kimmel had already publicly acknowledged and apologized for in 2020. One observer quoted in coverage of the response noted, "Incredible that someone who allegedly speaks for the most powerful man in the world spent their afternoon writing a Yelp review about Jimmy Kimmel's home life." The story about the Chung meltdown ran in every major outlet. More people heard the North Korea and CBS line. Trump was still angry. Here is the pattern the Trump administration has been unable to break out of for 2 straight years, laid out in sequence. Colbert calls the Paramount settlement a bribe. CBS cancels his show. Colbert wins an Emmy. Trump celebrates. Colbert says, "Go find yourself," on live television. The audience cheers. Trump attacks. The ratings go up. Kimmel is suspended after FCC pressure. He returns to 6.26 million viewers, the highest-rated episode in the show's history. Trump claims victory. Kimmel compares CBS to North Korea at the Oscars. The White House communications director posts a furious rant. Every news outlet covers the rant. More people hear the North Korea and CBS line. Colbert calls Trump's war the improv war. Trump gives a primetime address full of disputed claims. Colbert calls the speech concise and intelligent, says April Fools, and says he put lamb's blood on his television so the speech would pass him by. Fox News runs a segment the next morning accusing Colbert of rooting against the country. A YouGov poll shows 59% of Americans disapprove of the Iran war, which means Fox and Friends is the network rooting against the 59%. Every attack amplifies the critic. Every meltdown makes the criticism more newsworthy. Every White House response confirms that the joke hit its target. The London School of Economics released an analysis warning that late-night comedy shows have measurable real-world influence on voting behavior and political engagement, and that forcing these shows off air could create a structural information vacuum ahead of the midterm elections. That is not a partisan argument. It is an academic study warning that what is being done to late-night television is structurally dangerous for informed democratic participation. Trump's approval sits at 33%. 60% disapproval, the highest disapproval number since he was voted out the first time. His Iran war, which began without congressional authorization, which has now drawn nearly the entire American inventory of JASSM-ER cruise missiles away from Pacific stockpiles, which has resulted in Iranian drone strikes on Kuwaiti oil infrastructure and Bahraini energy facilities, which has intelligence analysts warning that Iran will likely emerge with greater regional influence than it had before the conflict began. That war has 59% disapproval. Gas prices are climbing toward $5 a gallon. Foreclosures are up 32% year over year. Job growth in the first 9 months of the year is the worst in 15 years outside the pandemic. Consumer confidence is at historic lows. Credit card delinquencies are surging. The president has requested $377 million of taxpayer money for White House renovations, an 866% increase from the prior year, while simultaneously cutting healthcare, housing support, and education funding for Americans who cannot currently afford their rent. And on Truth Social, Trump is posting photographs of himself pudding and writing, "Winning is always nice." Stephen Colbert's final episode airs May 21st. He has kept his promise. Every night since the cancellation was announced, the gloves have stayed off. The Churchill comparison, the Improv war, the April Fool's review, the Emmy speech, the Kennedy Center fact check, the CBS statement that he scrunched up on camera and placed into a dog waste bag on his own show on the CBS network. He told GQ, "If people have theories that associate the cancellation with the political pressure, it's a reasonable thing to think, because the corporation clearly did it once." He is saying this until May 21st on the network owned by the corporation that made the payment. After that, he is done. But the record stays, the Emmy stays, the clips stay, the Improv war stays, the big fat bribe stays. The go fuck yourself stays, delivered from the same stage where the Beatles once played, to an audience that gave him a standing ovation not for a punchline, but for refusing to go quietly when they came for him. They made one mistake, he said. They left him alive. Subscribe if you believe the most powerful thing a canceled man can do is keep talking.